All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Um, we still have a few more people logging in, so we'll take maybe one more minute here to while I admit folks to the room and we make sure we're all set up here. Great. Excellent. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Burgess Jules. I'm a co-founder of the Archiving the Black Web project, along with my friend and colleague, Makiba Foster, who's listening in today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. At Archiving the Black Web, our work is connected to teaching digital preservation and web preservation skills to Black memory workers primarily. And so we're really involved in sort of the work happening on the internet, online culture, and how Black people express themselves on the web. But the project also is interested in what underlies the web, right? How the web is developed, how the web is maintained, and the people involved in that work. Um, we also try to understand ethics and try to bring that into our work. We try to understand the human capital, right? The human people that are making the web work, right? And so as AI is um, is really infiltrating all the work that we do in all these different fields. We wanted to take an opportunity to bring some of that conversation into the archiving the Black web space, but not necessarily talking about, what AI tools could do for web preservation or digital preservation. We're really interested in how people are being exploited by this new sort of AI innovation, right? And what that means for labor, what that means for people's mental health, what that means for our environment, right? And so we think it's appropriate for us to be having this conversation, for us to bring these kinds of topics over to the cultural memory space so that we have an understanding as well about what is happening with this so-called AI innovation and how that's impacting people's real lives. So that's why we're sort of hosting these series of conversations. We'll be hosting about 9 of these over the course of the year. So we hope you'll join back with us. But I'm really excited to have Meredith Clark, the academic lead for the Archiving the Black Web Project, as our host for this series of conversations, and of course to have Joan and Ephantus from the Data Labelers Association joining us for this first series of conversations as we move this forward. Um, and so, Meredith, I'll pass it on to you now, but I just wanted to welcome everyone and to talk about the context for why we're doing this work and why we're having these conversations. So Meredith, I'll pass it on to you now.
Thanks, Burgess. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Meredith D. Clark. I'm an associate professor of race and political communication at UNC Chapel Hill, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this conversation today. Today, we are talking with two folks with a very important organization, the Data Labelers Association. And I want to start by talking a little bit about a part of the Black web that isn't often in front of our attention. What we get from AI tools when we query them and ask them to do different tasks is human-powered labor. And it's something that our guests today want us to keep in mind when we think about the components of what makes the Black web. People power makes the Black web. When we had a conversation on Wednesday, I asked Joan and Ephantus a little bit about their work and how someone becomes a data labeler. And what they told me was shocking. You'll hear some of it yourself. To me, I think that it's unfathomable to have to put your heart and soul into a job that requires you to give detailed instructions on how to molest a child or how perhaps to mutilate a human being. But it's just one of the tasks that data labelers, who are the workers that are responsible for collecting, cleaning, and categorizing the data that powers generative AI platforms like Claude and ChatGPT, must do in great painstaking detail. For this reason, Joan and Ephantus have organized a collective of workers in Kenya who are paying attention to the rights and the advocacy and care of workers who are the people behind these AI systems. I'll briefly introduce them and then we'll get into our conversation. Joan Kinyua is a digital labor organizer, AI justice advocate, and president of the Data Labelers Association. She's a former data labeler with nearly a decade of experience across the AI supply chain. Through the DLA, she has championed worker-led initiatives such as a model contract and a voluntary code of conduct to protect AI workers. Ephantus Kanyugi is a data worker and programs lead at the Data Labelers Association. Since 2018, he has worked alongside the human hidden labor practices that teach machines how to see, interpret, and decide. Today, he focuses on creating space for visibility, dignity, and historical recognition of the African workers whose contributions sustain the digital age, but often go unnoticed. So, Joan and Ephantus, I want to say welcome to our conversation today. And one of the ways that I love to get these things started is to ask you what you would normally be doing on a Friday at this time.
Um, okay, so thank you so much for having me. Um, I think I've worn so many hats, so I'll start from the very first job I started. So at a time like this, I'd be commuting back home because the day ends at 5 p.m. in the evening. Um, when I was doing platform jobs, I used to sign into the platforms at 3 p.m. in the evening. So I would either still be sending tasks or refreshing the platform in hopes of getting a task or training people because I've also worked as a trainer. And this would be my second shift. Um, as an activist, what is this? That is what I am at the moment. Usually, I would be in meetings with my teammates trying to strategize around what is happening at summer now and having conversation around how we can help. So that's how I typically start my day or end my day, depending on where the questions find me. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ephantus, how about you? How would you normally be spending this time on a Friday? It looks like Ephantus may be stuck, so I'm going to go on to one of our next questions. I'm going to pop a story into the chat for those who are following along with us on the web, but I'll briefly describe it for people who are following from their phone or another way. Oh, Ephantus is back. Ephantus, how would you
Yes,
normally be
yes,
spending your Friday?
yes. It depends. Life has taken a bit of a trajectory, but ideally, before I have been a data worker for 8 years. We call it data work or data labeling because it's very broad. Um, so it involves things such as could be data collection. We do data annotation, which is doing specific tasks to data so that it can have a specific output that is then fed to an AI system to teach it how to do something. That process is called data annotation. It could be transcription. It could be data analysis itself, things of that nature. And a lot of the data labelers or the data workers actually work across the board on all these things. So typically, due to the nature of work and the structure of work, a lot of people are forced to work, say, 18 hours a day. Therefore, right now, I'd probably still be at my laptop, just clicking away at a mouse at a job that, you know, the current task that I do have. But currently, we run an association. It's called the Data Labelers Association, which talks about advocates for better rights. Sorry, we have an association which advocates for better working conditions of data labelers in the data space. Yeah, that's basically. So right now, maybe we'll be coming from a meeting, which is what I'm doing now. Thank you.
Totally understood. So both of you talk about the jobs actually doing this work of data labeling, signing in, looking for the tasks that are being assigned, and recognizing that data labeling can be anything from actually processing images to labeling text, just preparing it for use in these large language models and other spaces. Meta announced earlier this week or late last week, I think it was, that they are taking 1,000 of those jobs out of Kenya. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means for members of the Data Labelers Association and people who are looking for those jobs and the work that they do?
The best way to answer your question is to say that AI is viewed as this magic thing that exists. But for the tech workers, we feel like it's been done intentionally to mask the fact that there's a human labor aspect attached to this work that's being done. So a lot of people don't know that there's human labor attached to AI systems that do exist. And so a lot of exploitation and a lot of injustice has been happening in the background. And for example, like last week, I think within this month, there's an article that came out that exposed Meta, where whenever you buy the smart glasses that they've just and you use them in real time, they're supposed to, let's say you're doing an interview, for example, or you're speaking to someone, it can actually engage with you and give you directions on the conversations and things of that nature. But what people do not understand is that it's collecting data. The data is collected, since a lot of people don't know that it's collecting data, even as they don't know. So it collects very intimate data. So you could be maybe in the toilet, the glasses are on, so they're collecting data. People could be having sex, being intimate in the bedroom. People maybe are comfortable around the house, so they're walking naked. Such situations, and this data is being collected. And so while the research was being done, so the expose was done, but then for this information to get out, it had to be that it was what we were speaking up about, the improper use or the improper also collection of data through the meta glasses. And so what happened was that the article came out. Meta has been having a lot of blowback and a lot of attention has been drawn to the issue. But what Meta did was it retaliated, therefore sacked the whole team. So because of the article, 1,108 people actually lost their jobs. And this is what we say when we talk about there's no protections for workers, because one article was what was the cause of 1,108 people losing their livelihoods, and they might have people who are actually depending on them. So you can imagine the kind of situation that these people find themselves in. So it is a bit of a tough situation. We're trying to figure out how to go about the situation and how to help people as the association. And we're still trying to brainstorm on what's the best way forward in terms of helping them and getting them at least on their feet. Yeah. I think I'll pass it to Joan. Maybe she might have something to add.
Yeah. To add on what Ephantus has said, I think you have asked a very important question where you're asking us, so what does this mean for the workers? So I can tell you for free that most of the workers who are still working for Meta were the most productive people, and the people who had also stayed in the company or in the organization for a very long time. So we're speaking about 5 years into it. We're speaking about even people maybe I used to work with when I was still working at Summer. And the more you stay in these spaces, the less the skills that you developed or the skills that you are trained on in secondary school or in uni, the less they get irrelevant. So what these people have been doing is basically the labeling jobs. And remember, it's just entry-level types of labeling. So what this means is for the workers, for the people who are really, really desperate is to look for the next very shitty organization like Just Summer and then apply for these same jobs because they do not have the skills that can help them to integrate in the job market easily. Because again, what you're taught here is you're supposed to draw boxes, you're supposed to, like there in this field, there are very specific things that you're supposed to do, which cannot be transferable in any other field. And also it's a conversation you cannot have with people. How do you tell people that you've been prompting chatbots? So it's, when you might go for an interview and end up explaining to the interviewer interviewee what type of job you're doing, and they really do not understand because it's something that people really do not know. Other than maybe nowadays we have this conversation around the types of tasks we do. So it's back to the drawing board. It's people going back to their home country. So it's people who maybe had moved from informal settlement to a better maybe area. Now it's you go back to the informal settlements because you do not have anything. It's like simply pulling out somebody from maybe a 3 and the third stair to a 0, and then there's nothing you can do about it.
One of the things that I found interesting was your description of who some of the people are that are doing these jobs. For folks who don't know, there's been a couple references to SAMA, which is one of the personnel communities that sort of positions these jobs. I've put a link into our chat that gives you a little bit of background about SAMA. And I note that the story that folks are getting, that it's being sold to tech founders, is that SAMA and companies like it are providing ways for people in Kenya, in India, in other countries to lift their families out of poverty. But you all have told us a little bit about what it takes to be a data labeler, this very specific skill set. How do people get screened for and selected for this job? And what does it say about their background, preparation, and education?
I think I'll go first. Yeah, so as for me, I was given a link. Back then, it was a form of referral for you to get a job. So it's somebody from the inside to give you a referral link. But then in this referral link, you have to say that you live in the informal settlement. So if I had to say that I live in Kibera, even the training centers were just based in Kibera. So another thing I was forced to do is shrink my educational background. I had to say that I just completed my Form 4 and I do not have any further education around. In case you had further education and you mentioned it in the application, that meant that you were overqualified for the task. But yeah, that's how I got into this field. I think I'll just pass it to Ephantus again.
Yes, so the wording is very, the tech companies try to make it look like they are really trying to promote either fresh graduates or people who maybe just finished Form 4. And what they try to do is try to sell a narrative that they're trying to help people from poor communities. But what happens is when you're called for an assessment, like you had Joan say, she's told that she needs to say that she comes from Kibera. Kibera is a slum, but she doesn't live in Kibera. When you're told that you need to say that you just finished Form 4, which is just the high school level, then that's the qualification that they go and showcase to the people who, let's say the clients or the people, and say that they're promoting that. But what you find is that the first thing they'll give you when you go for an assessment, they'll give you a cognitive aptitude test. And the questions are very technical. It has, very complex math. It has very complex literature questions, things of that nature. So you need to, one, be very educated. And then now, once you pass the cognitive test, you're put in a pool, a waiting pool, where you wait to be assigned to a project. So when a project comes, all they do is give you a Word document. It could be 4 or 5 pages, has descriptions and images of the project. And then they say that this is what we want. So For example, you're talking about a medical project. So they'll give you a document that says, hey, we're trying to find this type of bacterial. It could be, say, let's use an X-ray for an example. So you get an X-ray and then there's a specific bone that has a certain issue, but is it a fracture? Is it, the different kinds of things, the terminologies. And so they give you a document that has all this information. And then once you're done with the document, they give you a test that is commensurate of the project. And then only the people who qualify or who pass this assessment are the only people onboarded. But what you realize is that you can't learn, for example, medical terms through a document that you've just read in 5 or 10 minutes. You can't learn technical terms in the engineering space in just one Word document. So what you find is that they sell the narrative that they are hiring people who are just Form 4 leavers, but then just based off the criteria they use to find people to work on different projects, you find that they are trying to find very, very skilled people. In the work hall, we used to work a group of 6 people. So it's a huge table, and then it has a seat on one, another one, and then 2 on the sides and 2 on the sides. And on the table, I personally have studied economics and finance. So I used to qualify for a lot of financial projects, a lot of projects around economics. Next to me was someone who studied engineering. The other person was doing nursing. I believe the other one was actually a pharmacist. And then the other person, I believe, was a lawyer. Yeah. And so you find someone like the lawyer would qualify for a literature project. Maybe the nurse would qualify for something that involves medicine and such. So yeah. So the packaging is very different from what is actually happening.
Right. So on one hand, you're getting this narrative that data labelers, people who are working on the other side of these projects, don't come from educated backgrounds, that this is low-skilled labor. That's a phrase that's tossed around a lot when we talk about this, but this is actually very technical labor. It's subject specific, and you need to have real expertise in it. I heard you both mention that it's sort of advantageous to downplay your education in order to even get into the screening for the job. So, a very different narrative than what's being sold from the tech founders. I want to ask you a little bit about what the actual work means for the data that these systems are getting and what that means for what the world learns from these systems. So, Ephantus, you talked about having to label things like a different bacteria. We've talked a little bit about labeling items like images and assigning labels and values to those images. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done when you've been working labeling on a project, how you are called to make specific judgments, and what that means for how we understand the information that's being processed in these systems?
One thing that I would like everybody in the room to kind of think about, you need to think about AI as a child that doesn't know anything, and it only learns through the data that it is fed. So, for example, if we are talking about a self-driving car, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. So when there's a self-driving car, so we were being given data. Let's say they want to teach it how to identify someone on the road. So what would happen is we would get a lot of either images or videos of people walking on the streets, and for us it's to annotate. So it could be, when you talk about annotation, it could be drawing boxes around people and identifying the people for it. Or it could be segmenting, which means that you're tracing out the outline of these people. And for that one, you would find that the more we do this and the more data is fed into this machine or this AI system, then it gets to a point where now it is able to identify certain shapes. When it comes across an object when driving, it is able to identify a shape. And then from that shape, it can be able to decipher that this is a human. And the same is done now for vehicles, for buildings, for road mappings, for potholes. Basically everything that you see on the road. That is an example of a project. And the thing is, everybody is innovating in the AI space. So When we talk about pharma, people are trying to innovate in the pharma space. When we talk about the manufacturing industry, people are trying to innovate in that space. Even in education, people are trying to innovate in that space. And therefore, the scope of work that a lot of the data labelers or the data workers work in is very, very broad. And we come across a lot of projects. One thing also we need to think about is that we actually did what we call, I don't remember the term for it, but we used to also work on projects like when working on LLMs, things like ChatGPT, for example, there were projects where we would train them not to give negative prompts. And as Meredith was giving an introduction, she said that we actually worked on projects where we would be given prompts and we need to give an answer, a very descriptive answer, and we would be asked things like, um, describe how you would molest a child, and you need to give it, you were graded, so you need to give very descriptive answers. You would also be asked things like, how do you eat someone alive? How would you go about skinning a human person alive? How do you go about raping someone? Things of that nature. And you need to know this work, or you're basically fired from your job. So you therefore need to sit there and really put yourself in the mind or headspace of someone who's actually molesting a child, and try to put yourself in their frame and try to think about what they would be doing, so that now you can be able to give something that's very, very descriptive. The problem is these kinds of jobs, they pay very, very poorly, which means that a lot of people are forced to work 18 hours. So you can imagine someone working 18 hours on that kind of project. Despite working 18 hours, they can only afford to pay for, let's say, a very shitty house. Can only be able to pay, can eat. So a lot of people eat maybe one meal a day because they can't afford it, despite working 18 hours. And then also you find that they can't afford things like insurance and all that. So on top of the nature of work, now the environment of the work is also very troubling for people. So you find that a lot of people have a lot of mental issues tied to the job that they do.
Joan?
Yeah, I think I'd also want to add some more of that because when we were still working and when we were working also together with people who are doing content moderation, there are things that we started noticing, or the things other people started noticing. So you'd find somebody who started working on these projects like a very sober type of person. Now they are asking for specific content. For example, they are asking for children content. So that means the work that they are working on now has totally desensitized them. Now this is somebody who has pedophilic behavior, is capable of doing anything to children, right? And in this type of work, you do not have any opt-out mechanism. So if you want to opt out, that means then you will not be earning, you will not be working. And in case you want to feel special and go and complain, there's a lot of retaliation you're going to face because there's also a pool of people, as Ephantus mentioned, there's a pool of people waiting for this opportunity. So even if it does not settle well with you, there is nothing you can do about it. So it's up to you to be as creative as possible, as descriptive as possible. And I think something we forgot to mention is our quality threshold is 95% and above. So anything less than 95%, that means you did not work. You're not supposed to get paid. Imagine for you to get as creative as 97%, but then the creativity is thinking about how you're supposed to skin a person alive. Yeah. So that this is the types of work that we have been exposed to. And somebody I know might ask, what is the end product for this? Or what is, like, you usually don't know. You're just given content and you're given instructions. And the least you can do is follow the instructions and then submit the tasks. And then you call it a day. Yeah.
So absolutely no context. You're basically, we have an analogy about feeling different parts of an elephant. And if you're in one place, you might feel the skin and you think it's one thing. If you're somewhere else, you feel the tail and you think it's a different animal. So doing this work in ways that are piecemeal, that don't even allow the workers to get a full picture of what they're contributing to. Like there's no real clarity about what your end product is. I want to follow up on that with the data that you're working with and the judgment calls that you have to make that assign value to certain things. You've both talked about doing this labeling with pictures. What sort of calls are you having to make? Do you decide on aesthetics of certain materials? Do you assign value like something being good, something being bad? Tell us a little bit more about some of that work.
So there's different types of tasks you're given. For example, somebody somewhere wants to sell the narratives that only white women are the most beautiful women in this world. So they're going to come up with photos of white women, blonde hair, pointy nose, blue eyes, very white teeth. Then that was supposed to describe as perfection. So this is the most beautiful person. And I think you can do that. Even when you Google, there's this narrative of like the most beautiful person is definitely not a Black person. There's also where you're supposed to, as an African, what like our traditional attire, our traditional gear revolves around costumes, and these costumes somewhat lie on the naked side of things. So when I'm working on these tasks, an African costume is nudity, but when I'm judging based on a white person wearing a very stringy bikini that literally does not hide anything, then that's okay. When we speak about even content that you guys think, something like the Roomba, which I know most of you have. Initially, it was we were being given things that were put down. Like you can see, this is something that has been put down. But then as time went by, we started getting information from people's homes. Now we can see you in the kitchen. We can see faces of your children, even if you do not share them online. We can see people sitting in the toilet being very comfortable, because you do not know if the Roomba is collecting any information. After all, it's performing its duties. It's washing the houses, it's collecting dust, it's doing everything right. But for that Roomba to perform as it is performing, it is also collecting a lot of information without your knowledge. Besides that, there's also projects that Ephantus had mentioned earlier, where we have been told it's collecting data collection, where you're told to give either your pics. It started very easily. It's your pictures of yourself sitting behind a desk, wearing a mask, wearing a cap, and all those things. But as time went by, things started becoming more weird, because you're being told, send photos of your children doing cartwheel, 0 to 12 years, or you're changing them diapers, or even like people who are over the age of 60, or the ones that have dementia and stuff like that, also take photos of them being changed diapers or like just doing things. And again, I reference back to what I was saying, like you're not told what these tasks are for. You do not know if it is us who are being conformed to somebody's narratives or point of view, or there are some people somewhere that are just being fed this and then they're listening to it. But I think I'll let Ephantus add more context to it, but it's all that.
Yeah, so broadly, what John is describing is when you see it's data that's collected, data that's annotated, and then data given to an AI system, and then the AI system learns from that data, and then now improves based on, you can call it the mother data. But then what happens is that people are the ones who are deciding on what to do with this data. So you can see that there's room for bias. So you find that as the example John was giving about, it's the easiest one to understand. So when you're talking about beauty standards, so what the person who's giving you this project views as beautiful, they'll come to you and give you images about beauty. And so they'll tell you, so for them, maybe as John was describing, maybe this is a light-skinned person, they have very blue eyes, they have, blonde hair. And that is the version, the person who's providing this data to you so that they can build an AI system. This is the version of what beauty is. And therefore, when you're given images and something does not meet that criteria, you, as a person, you are supposed to reject that image as a beauty standard because they don't meet that beauty standard. So if someone has blemish, freckles, things of that, if their teeth, if you have crossing teeth, like that's not beauty. And the danger of that is that now when we come into after the AI program is produced, you can imagine that that would probably be a project for cosmetic. Um, it could be a cosmetic product, AI product. And so as you're interacting with this AI, and it's been developed on the basis that a blonde person with blonde hair is the standard of beauty, then what would it do when now we are talking about children now asking, am I beautiful? What should I do to improve? You see, like it could, you see how the biases that are given from the developer, the person who's providing the data, can sit now into the back end, not the back end per se, but to the consumer end, where now these biases are the ones which are influencing the decisions that the AI is people as solutions for some of their problems.
I want to circle around, and I appreciate this discussion about how the work that the data labelers do ultimately influences how we are starting to think based on the responses that we're getting from AI systems that have been developed out of the data that the labelers have trained. But there's something that Joan said that I want to come back to, so we can talk about some of these labor rights, care, and dignity as we set out with this particular session. Joan, you mentioned that as time goes on, sometimes workers are asked to send different types of photos and photos from their everyday lives, photos of their children, of elders in their communities. And I'm curious about how the workers are thinking about enacting boundaries between themselves and the work. If you are asked for a picture or pictures from where you live, pictures of the people you love, how does this violate those boundaries between you and the work that you're doing that is essentially extracting from your experience in order to train these systems? Tell us about some of the protections that you are working for workers in DLA and workers who are doing this.
So I'll start by saying, first of all, even as we were part of the data collection project, all in the name of earning. And usually it's you submit maybe 15 tasks and then you promised $5. And they want very high-end phones. So there's a person who can hire you a phone and then you can send it. You can send the photos. So in the instance that one is wrong, you're not going to get the $5. That means you did not give them quality work, so all of your work is rejected. But then they do not return the photos to you because you had already shared with them the photos. So now they are gaining from you and you're not gaining anything. And it cuts across board. So you're asked to give photos of CCTV footage, of receipts after you've done your shopping, of your household, people doing things and all those things. So it's not limited to anything. It's not even limited to age, as I had mentioned earlier. So when we started thinking about forming an association the very first year, we also decided to do a research. And because DLA was formed because of a research that I was doing earlier. And I think throughout the research, every day was a learning experience. Photos of children, according to our Kenyan constitution, anybody around of under the age of 18 years that person is considered a child. So anything, they're totally protected by the constitution. So when you see a platform asking for information about children, that means even for us, we did not know that it is illegal or it is there's anything wrong we are doing. So when you're submitting these tasks, you just want to earn. And usually it's because there's no maybe labeling project, and you've stayed some few months or weeks without earning anything, only in the name of just getting the money. So you're just forced to take the photos. In the future, or what you're doing for DLA, because even us, we did not have that civic education and knowledge about around what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do when it comes to data collection. So what you're doing is you're really having the civic education conversation with the workers. And we started with one that we did a few months ago in Nairobi, in a place called Arboretum, where we were speaking to the workers about how important it is to communicate to the media, how important it is to, even not to the media alone, even to people like us, because some things you just find out because the workers are speaking about it. Now we are more on the activism side. It's that does not mean we've lost touch with the workers, but we also need them to know what we are doing for them. In the instance where we are speaking about money, and then somebody may think, oh, so instead of earning so much, like instead of staying without a job, I'd rather earn this. So we are trying, and we are trying to let them know, like, instead of just accepting this, instead of working without proper regulation, instead of being paid cash and you do not have any deductions or the tax deductibles and mental health protections and all those things, you can speak up and you can demand better, and you want the best for you. Do not accept anything because it is just being presented to you. So yeah, I think those are the things that you're trying to do. Usually it's the worker empowerment and the civic education. Yeah.
We'll open up for questions at this time. I ask that you put your questions in the chat so that we can see them. I have a few more questions for our guests. We'll talk a little bit more about those labor rights, care, and dignity for African AI data workers. I'd like to continue on this subject about advocating for yourselves as data labelers and data workers. When we talk about doing this advocacy work, are there certain policies that you are looking to have passed? Are there certain protections that you want? Anything about, how far a task can go in asking for something from those labelers, respecting, as you said, the laws that protect children? What are some of the policies and measures that you are looking to have enforced to protect workers?
Fantas, are you going to take that, or I? So yeah, let me address that. Okay. So as for me, I think the most important thing for now is end-to-end transparency. For example, where is this data coming from? How is this data being used? In the long run, what is this data? How much time are you going to spend with my information if I've shared this information? And what is the end product? Is it for the good of the community, or just people, because they have so much money, they can do anything they want with it, right? Another thing we are thinking about is making sure like people are really protected mentally, because the mental harm these things are causing. You might not work on a graphic project, but then you're working 18 to 20 hours a day, and then in the hopes of having something at the end of the week or at the end of 2 weeks. And then that money does not come. And you have family, you have dependents, you even have your own bills. That adds on to the stress. When it comes to even people who are working in the BPOs, business processing outsourcing, usually they claim that they are paying for their mental health, but then it's not a place where you can go and have a conversation and be genuine to the mental health practitioner, because whatever it is you're going to discuss with the person is going to tell it to the management, because the mental health are not separate from the management. And at times you are really being targeted because of the information that you give. And at times, remember, most of these projects you're not supposed to disclose what you're working on. So even speaking to the mental health practitioner about the problems that you're encountering because of the job, again, it's another job. And in case you want to also access an outside mental health person, you have to start the story from scratch. So again, it's just like it's adding salt to an injury on a serious basis. So like when we start speaking about basic needs are the ones that we really need immediately. Some people might take it for granted, but that is what we need at the moment. We want to be protected. We want social health protections. We want mental health protection, and then pay people well. The same types of job you're doing in Kenya, we're being paid cents per task. But when it goes to the other sides, because they have policies and they're being forced to adhere to these policies, they're paying $50 to $60. So it's just that exploitation and discrimination that you can actually see the things, policies that are speaking around that. Because there's no difference in me being here in Kenya and another person being in the States, and we are doing actually the same type of work, and then I might get paid, I might not get paid, simply because I happened to be in a jurisdiction that does not protect its workers or does not have like the right political people, or like the same exact way you're treating workers that are in your side. Make sure even here, because when you see the self-driving cars, there are some hiccups here and there, but then they are doing fine. You can even see the amount of money they are bringing in. The Meta Ray-Ban, they are perfection. They are taking everything. They're giving the right content. So that means the people who are working behind these systems really dedicated themselves to these systems. But then instead of these systems being of help to them, they're being used to even undermine them even more and make them even more invisible, which is very painful. Yeah.
Indeed, it's a stark reminder that when we see how well AI is working, whether it's the driverless cars or asking it to identify something or giving it a query and expecting a correct answer, we have to remember that that performance is due specifically to the exploitation of someone else on the other side. That this doesn't come through a magic algorithm as people tend to think of it, but it comes through the actual human capital that's being invested with people who are often experiencing wage theft and other forms of labor exploitation. Ephantus, you were going to weigh in?
Uh, yes, yes. So I would like to give a story. So we used to work for a platform. The owner is a billionaire. It's called Scale AI. And so we work through platforms or um, what to call them. Um, okay, so it's usually tech companies, and then there's an intermediary who does all the sourcing, the employment. They're split into two. So we have platforms where you work online, and then we have BPOs where it is a physical location where workers actually go to work. And so for the BPO people who work on site, they are probably paid around $200 a month. But then even about $100 just to transport, just to go to the office. So you can imagine the kind of pay that people are getting. But then that is where now they start working on this project. So also even when you look at content moderation, for example, it's similar to data labeling, but it's not the exact same thing. Where you find that Facebook, for example, Meta cannot control what is posted online. But then you as the end consumer never really gets to see like really graphic, don't get to see graphic content. This is because there's someone who's been put in place to act as a filter. So these people look at this content every day for 8 hours a day. And you're looking at people, for example, committing murder, committing suicide. People actually recording themselves and posting as they are raping people. And people actually looking at this content for a whole day. And all they get is $200. They're not even given psychosocial protection. A good example was a certain lady who was in the production hall, and she actually collapsed and started screaming. This is because she was skimming through the video. So we even have people from different parts of Africa who are brought into Kenya to be able to do this work through the BPO. And someone was working. So she's from South Africa. She's working on the platform. And she actually saw a video of her grandfather um, in a tragic accident. Like it was very bloody and everything. And so it's like people are like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's the issue and everything? So she says that she's seen her grandfather. And so all these people say is that, hey, you have a target, you go out for 5 minutes, breathe, come back, then continue because you have metrics, you have targets that you need to get. See, there's no like human decency in the space that you're working. As we were working, another example, as we were working on the platform, I used to work as a trainer. So I used to teach people how to do the data lifting tasks. And so for the first week, find that we would onboard people. I had to have 100 people in my bootcamp. And so I would constantly recruit people just to make sure that I hit my targets. But you'll find for the first week I'm doing training, nobody's paid. We get to week 2, nobody gets paid. But remember, now during training, it also means that you're also working. So now this person is working on a task, but I'm guiding them along the task just to make sure that I teach them how to give correct, correct accuracy. Like by the time you're done, by the second week, everybody is performing at the 90% benchmark that we are usually given. And so you get to week 3 and then to week 4. So these people have been working for a month, but they've never been paid. So a lot of people drop off from the platform. But then remember, I have a target of 100 workers. That means that I recruit again so that I don't get fired because I don't meet my metrics. And then I get another 100 people, get them through the program, do the training, go through 4 weeks of training. Nobody gets paid. All of them drop off, and then I have another target of 100 people. So as you can see, this is a cycle that they are able to create, that they can be able to take advantage of people, get high quality work, but then do not pay these people for the work that they've done. And through my bootcamp, within a period of 6 months, I think I had around 8,000 workers, 4,000 to 8,000 workers through my bootcamp. We had 150 trainers working on this platform. On this you will need the profit that you was getting. So when there was a lot of backlash, a lot of social media, because when you have, say, 10,000 people tweeting the same issue about you guys, and what would happen if they mistakenly feel the backlog of the money that you had. So let's say one week you wake up, it's payday, that you have about $1,000. What they'll do is they will terminate your account and say that you violated a policy. Then your account is closed and there's no place that you can report to or you can go to do get recourse for this issue. And so now there was a time when that happened in Valve and they actually trended. What happened is they pulled the platform from Kenya, similar to what now it has done. So they pulled the platform, said that Kenya was a fraudulent country, which was they were pulling out, closed remote task, and then reopened another subsidiary called Outlier. The only difference between Outlier is only the color of the platform and the name of the platform, but it's the exact same platform. And then they rebranded it as entirely different and then brought it into the market. So when we say there's a lot of exploitation, there's a lot of exploitation that's going on. And there's nobody that you could go to report to, because if they terminate my account, who can I go to say that they can't go to the police? I can't go to scale offices because I don't even know who the client is. Remember, our work is piecework, so I don't even know which client I'm working for. And so that's why we chose to form an association as the Data Labelers, called it the Data Labelers Association. And what we did was we actually did a survey. We collected data from workers. It was about 250 data labelers. We actually have a membership of 1,000 members. And we came up with a list of the majority of the main challenges that these people are facing. So it could be low pay, mental health issues, lack of growth in the sector, lack of recognition of data labeling as a profession. So, for example, I've worked 8 years as a data labeler, but how does that transition to any other job that I apply to do, because it's not recognized as a proper career? So all these things are the things that you're trying to come up with solutions for, so that you can be able to try and address some of these issues, just to see if you can be able to improve the lives of workers in the digital space.
I see. I want to field some of the questions that we have in the chat. So thinking about this last point about the different ways that the exploitation takes place by denying people credit for their labor, denying them pay for their labor, withdrawing jobs as a means of retaliation, kicking them off platforms as a means of retaliation, coming back and rebranding as a different business in order to sort of come back to the same group of workers and exploit them. With all of this in mind and thinking about the conditions that your members, that other data labelers are working in, do you think that data work can be ethical? It's a question from Ornella.
I think Ephantus can respond to that because he's among the best practices among the people that you use for best practices because he has a client he works for. Let me ask him to just continue the story. Yeah.
Yes, so we could say that the tech companies basically take advantage of workers because they can get away with it. So, for example, for a lot of these workers, they're usually given a 2 weeks contracts or a month contract that's renewed every month. So, like for example, I worked at a tech company for 5 years, but I was given a monthly contract every month for the 5 years. But according to Kenyan laws, once a worker on a dependent contract for at least 3 months, they're supposed to get a permanent contract. But then the digital worker doesn't exactly fall under the definition of a worker in the current constitutional, the legal framework that we do have. And so we find that they usually find loopholes that they can get to. We actually have Uber workers. They actually took Uber to court, but then their justification was that we don't have an office in Kenya, so we cannot be sued in Kenya. Therefore, we take advantage of. See, like they were taken to court for taking advantage of the workers, but then they were justifying that they should not be held accountable in Kenya because they don't have physical offices in Kenya. So it could be, and I'm fortunate enough to have met a very good client that I work with, who, for example, they are investing, for example, in small causes. For example, we need projects, so they take me through a small course that teaches me those things. Could be I actually went through project management training, how to do data management. So we have clients who are actually really good and try to invest in the development of the data workers. But what you find is that a lot of tech companies try to exploit workers because they can, and because there are loopholes in the legal framework that exists, because it adapts very fast. And so the law and policy and governments are very slow in terms of how they go about changing policy and all those things. But it is possible. I think the ILO has taken up the conversation. A lot of governments are very interested, and also a lot of consumers are also interested in how this data is curated to create these AI systems, and therefore there's a lot of pressure from a lot of spaces to sort of give good working conditions. So maybe with time, as we continue with our work, we'll probably get to a point where we will have like decent working conditions for these data workers.
Thank you, Ephantus. I'm not sure what changed, but at the very end, your audio got better, so we're able to hear a little bit more clearly. So whatever you've done in the last 20 seconds, please hold on to that. I'm going to ask a couple more questions. We've got one from someone who sent theirs separately. From your experience as data annotators, have you ever been able to, or asked rather, to label content in languages or dialects that you aren't fully fluent in? And if so, how do you or how do other workers sort of cope with the gap between what you know and what you're being asked to do?
We could say that for LLMs and especially language projects, for that they're usually very. You remember in the beginning when we said that they give tests. So they will actually find people who are very good in that specific language and actually give cognitive tests and also give language tests. So, for example, a lot of English projects, you would have to do tests and mostly acquire maybe a C2 proficiency, get a certificate that shows that you have C2 of proficiency, and that is what would allow you to get onto the English project. So for the different dialects, they try to find people who are experts in that dialect, and those are the people who are voted onto those projects. Yeah.
Another question about AI and, is this all worth it? Um, from your perspective, doing this work, would you say that AI actually offers necessary or tangible benefits? Is it as miraculous as it's made out to be? Is the creation of this technology worth what is being done in order to make it?
Yeah, at times it depends really. So for example, as we mentioned earlier, you're given scans, mammograms, and all those things. And then after reading articles, you get to learn that you came up with a system that can detect cancer 5 years before it.
Joan, you somehow got muted.
I'm sorry. So when you look at it like from a medical perspective, you can see like there's some good that is going to come out of this. Also, there's the aspect where we are saying describe to an LLM how you're supposed to do these things. And then you're not being told what the end result of that is. For example, like the skinning and the hanging and the killing and the molesting. At the end of the day, we had to do our own background to find out what these projects are for. So that is when we learned that we were trying to teach these AI systems how to recognize harm so that people, when they go and self search and try to do bad things to people, the system can detect that and it cannot respond to such requests. So before you're told what you're actually working on, you really do not understand what you're working on. But if this kind of information is given to you before you're told, you're actually trying to help the system not to help people harm themselves or even harm the other people, then that's something that you might agree to. Or like if you want to be as descriptive as possible, that is something maybe because it's for good purpose. Um, like it really depends on how these things are being spoken or being conveyed. Um, as you mentioned earlier, this most of this time it's piecework job. So it's you're given a task and you're given instructions on how you're supposed to do these tasks, and nobody gives to to I don't know. They do not give to care. Like they do not tell you what these end results are. So you're left wondering: are these people trying to come up with a system where they're trying to do bad things to people? So when you think like there's two ways to think about it. There's the things that you can see like you're helping society, like this is something that might help society in the future or even helping society at the moment. But then on the other side, on the flip side, it is costing somebody's lives, it is costing somebody's mental health, it is cost like so it's a 50-50. But at the same time, you cannot, this is the biggest employer, let me say, for example, here in Kenya. So also look at it from an employment or like an economic point of view, where if these people do not have these types of projects or these types of work, then that means then there's no employment and probably people are not going to, people are not going to earn and they're not going to have their livelihoods and stuff like that. So there's two ways to look at things. There's the positive side where like we can see good things around the medical field and even end results of very harmful projects. But there's also the other side where we are not sure if you're not supposed to do this or if you're supposed to do this. Yeah.
So I want to end by combining our two last questions here in the chat. Folks want to know how we can support you, from libraries to researchers to policy makers, people who want to support the Data Labelers Association, support data labelers writ large. What can we do in different sectors to promote accountability and better conditions for laborers?
I can answer that. So one thing we are very much we like AI. AI is a multiplier. What we have an issue with is how the AI systems are, firstly, how they are made, and then two, the exploitation that's going on in the labor space. So what we are asking for is that as the end consumers of these AI systems, ask for transparency, ask about how the data was curated, ask about how it affects. For example, we do have data centers actually that have caused a lot of environmental harm. So if we can be able to also compare, like, hey, do you really need specific AIs to do specific things? Like, for example, an AI that you give a picture of a cat and it decorates it. Like, is that necessary? So at least we do have good AI systems that do help us in our daily activities. So, and then also the promotion of, say, if it's a good a good AI company that is providing a good solution and was curated in a proper way, if there's a way to commend that, but then also try to shame, for lack of a better word, like negative AI companies, then that would be great. And then also supporting these kinds of initiatives. For example, we've been a year into existence. We haven't yet found funding. And so with the initiatives that we're trying to do, we find that we struggle a lot. And it's because a lot of people tend to think of AI as a solution, instead of thinking about it from the perspective also of the people who have been involved in the process. So people are willing to invest in the AI, but are not willing to invest in the people who are actually working in the space. So yeah, if the people could at least consider that as they are using these solutions, also give pressure to the tech companies to provide the procurement process or the production process of these AI systems, then that could also put pressure on the tech companies just to make sure that they are actually doing the right thing and not trying to exploit workers as they come up with these solutions. Okay.
Thanks so much for that, Ephantus. So I just got a text from Meredith that she is not feeling well. That's why she went off video. But I think it's been a really great conversation so far. Joan, did you want to add anything to that last question before we close it down?
I just wanted to maybe give weight to what Ephantus are saying, just demand for transparency and accountability. Most people are consumers of social media or consumers of like just the technology we are speaking about. Let's just demand and ask question if how is this labor being treated? If it's not banned, then you can boycott this project. And also you can create awareness around the role of data labelers, because that's also another conversation that people are not knowledgeable of. So it's us speaking for ourselves and then having conversations with people like you and then now amplifying our voices. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there how do people support the Data Labelers Association directly? Like, how do you recommend people offer support to your organization and your organizing efforts?
Ephantus can address that.
Yeah, so you can reach out to us. We do have our email, which is info@datalabelers.org. You can check out our LinkedIn. We're also on LinkedIn, where we do a lot of that. We are trying to find a way to actually get donations, but you can get in contact with us directly just so that you can give your accounts. if in case you would like to support us financially as well. But yeah, ideally, we support everything. Try to support research. Try to support journalists also as they're trying to put the message out there. We try to do projects with people as long as we can see the in between or the crossroads between where the work that you're trying to do and the work that other people are trying to do, where we can find areas of synergy. We also like to work with other people just so that we can get this message as spread out as possible. So yeah, reach out to us on LinkedIn, and you can also reach out to us on our email, and we can be able to discuss things further. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to share your story with us. We really appreciate it, and you're doing really great work by fighting on behalf of your countrymen and for folks doing this kind of work. So keep up the fight. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you to our participants. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course, of course. All right, take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.